Hello. So, today I am going to do a single example which illustrates the way in which we can solve the linear differential equations which are derived for this kind of small oscillation problems. So, let me begin by looking at a simple coupled system. Okay, what I am going to do here is in small k oscillation problems, typically you have a problem which you sort of approximate to a linear problem, but I will begin by looking at a problem which is coupled harmonic oscillators, which is already linearized in form. Okay. So, this is not a the harmonic oscillations here are exact. Okay. So, what we have here is basically there are these two masses which are connected to a rigid wall on either side by its own spring, and then the two masses are also connected to each other by another spring there. Okay. So, if the middle spring was not there, the two springs or two masses would be simply harmonic motions of each of its own. Okay. By putting middle spring, now we are coupling the two oscillators there. Now, this problem in fact is very common and will appear in many contexts. One of the famous problems or observations made in 17th century by Huygens was, if you take two pendulum clocks and put them on the same wall, after some time the two clocks they become synchronous. Of course, their motion is out of phase, but they are synchronous. Okay. It turns out that the wall that basically on which both the pendulum clocks are mounted, the wall actually acts like some sort of a spring between the two pendulum, and they can be thought of as connected pendulums. Okay. At the end of this lecture, I will talk about how they get synchronized, but that is the problem it comes down to, and there are many other problems which come to this coupled oscillator. There are just 2 degrees of freedom here. Okay. The motion of each one of these bobs. Now, look at this this basically configuration given in the top is the equilibrium configuration. So, the length here is a natural length of the spring, L12 is a natural length of the middle spring, and L is again. So, basically the two side springs are identical to each other. So, when these masses move from their equilibrium position and this mass moves here and that mass moves there, I am going to use a coordinate x1 measured from the left edge, and x2 is the coordinate of the second bob from the left edge, and this small x1 and small x2 are basically deviations from the equilibrium positions. Okay. So, now that geometry is clear, let me write down the connections. So, your capital X1 is basically nothing but L plus x1, and capital L2 x2 here is basically L plus L12 plus x2. Okay. So, this is the two two coordinates x1 and x2 written in terms of deviations. Now, let me write down the Lagrangian. Lagrangian of course has a kinetic energy term which is half mx1 dot square plus half mx2 dot square, then the potential energy because of first spring, but look what the length of that spring now has been stretched and the extension is basically capital X1 minus L. Okay. So, the potential energy will be half k x1 minus L whole square, and there should be of course a minus sign here which I have forgot, I have made mistake, and plus the kinetic energy the potential energy of the second spring that you measure like this. So, the total length of this is basically twice L plus L12, that is this, minus x2 is basically the current length of the second spring and minus the natural length L whole square. Okay. This is the potential energy of the second spring, this spring here, and then you have to look at the intermediate spring. So, the potential energy because of that is basically nothing but x2 minus x1 minus L12, L12 being the natural length of the middle spring. Convert this to small x1 and small x2. Now, capital X1 dot is same as small x1 dot, and then you can write down all these in terms of the deviations from the equilibrium positions, that is in terms of this small x1 and small x2. So, the Lagrangian in terms of the generalized coordinates small x1 and small x2, that looks something like this. So, it is half m x1 dot square plus x2 dot square minus again. So, I just make the correction here, this is minus half k x1 square plus k x2 square and minus half k1 to x2 minus x1 square. Now, if k12 were 0, then of course, this term would not be there, and then you simply have the two uncoupled harmonic oscillators, okay, and not surprisingly, because that is exactly what the geometry is. Now, equation of motion can be constructed out of this Lagrangian, and those will be we know how to write those by taking the partial derivative of L with respect to x1 dot, then another d by dt of that must be equal to partial derivative of L with respect to the x1. Now, look at here mx1 double dot, this differential equation will come to minus k plus k12 times x1 plus k12 times x2. So, basically you get these two differential equations, one for x1 double dot, the other for x2 double dot, and they are coupled because x2 appears in this first equation and x1 appears in the second equation, and we want to solve this problem, okay, and this is basically coupled system. And here of course, again you can see if I have k12 equal to 0, then the first differential equation will simply become mx1 double dot is equal to minus k times x1. So, k12 would be 0, okay, fine. Now, let me put this in matrix form. So, if I want to put this in a matrix form, you put x1 and x2 in the column matrix, okay. So, it will be 2 by 1 column matrix, and the second derivative of that. So, this is basically pointwise derivative of each one of these terms must be equal to, on the right hand side I can neatly write this because the equations anyway are linear, x1 x2 in the column form and then this 2 by 2 matrix there, okay. So, that my first differential equation which is x1 double dot will be equal to minus k plus k12 times x1 plus k12 times x2, okay, fine. So, we got this neatly in a matrix form, and now you look at this differential equation and this matrix omega there. That matrix omega tells you that this particular system is coupled because there are off diagonal terms. If omega were diagonal, then of course, the system would be uncoupled, and that you can see here, if k12 is 0, the system is uncoupled. Now, omega here you can see that this is symmetric matrix, and if it is a symmetric matrix, we know it is fully diagonalizable with real eigenvalues, okay. And not only that, the diagonalization can be done using a orthogonal matrix. What that means is basically I can find one matrix U which is orthogonal such that U omega U transpose will give me a diagonal matrix, okay. And this diagonal matrix I am going to equate it to so basically it is a diagonal matrix with minus omega 1 square minus omega 2 square, and once you have it in diagonal form, then of course I can do something like this. Let me define two new coordinates eta 1 and eta 2. I have already found U which diagonalizes the omega matrix. Use the same U matrix here and define this new eta 1 eta 2, and now you go back to this equation, multiply on this side both sides by U matrix, and in between this you insert U transpose U, because U is orthogonal we already know that U transpose U is identity. So, I can insert that here, and what happens is that the second derivative of eta 1 and eta 2 now you see the matrix looks the equations in eta 1 and eta 2 they decoupled. So, this is basically a method of decoupling the linear system, okay, and that we can do because this omega matrix here is a symmetric matrix, and because it is a symmetric matrix I can diagonalize, I can get this U matrix, and U matrix can be used to basically compute the new variables there, and these new variables here they are called as normal coordinates, okay. And the solutions of these differential equations, because they are decoupled now, they are straightforward. Eta 1 is some constant a 1 times cos of omega 1 t plus phi 1, and similarly eta 2 is basically. So, these solutions here can be quickly obtained by simply diagonalizing this omega matrix there. Let me look at some specific cases here. Now, once I have these two solutions eta 1 and eta 2, I can now get x 1 and x 2 from eta 1 and eta 2 very quickly, okay, because x 1 x 2 is basically nothing but U transpose acting on eta 1 eta 2, fine. All right. Now, let me try and diagonalize this system. If I want to diagonalize the system, all that I have to do is take this omega matrix, subtract lambda times I from this matrix and find its determinant and equate it to 0. That is basically your characteristic equation, and the solutions of this characteristic equation, this characteristic equation are basically the eigenvalues of the matrix. Now, do that calculation. You can probably stop this video if you want and do this calculation yourself. So, if I subtract lambda from the diagonal terms, then all that will happen is k 1 plus k 2 k 1 2 sorry k plus k 1 2 divided by m plus lambda whole square will be equal to k 1 2 square by m square. Find out the two roots. This is basically a quadratic equation in lambda, and the two solutions there lambda 1 and lambda 2, I can write this as minus k by m and minus k plus k 1 2 by m, okay, 2 times k 1 2 by m, right. So, now I have the eigenvalues. Next step I do is find the eigenvectors. So, take lambda 1 and find xi 1 in such a way that the eigenvalue xi 1 becomes eigenvector corresponding to lambda 1, and this also is very easy to calculate, and I will ask you people to show that xi 1 will be basically 1 minus 1 by root 2, and similarly the second eigenvector is 1 1 by root 2, that is psi 2, that corresponds to the eigenvalue lambda 2. And now I can construct the U matrix by putting xi 1 and xi 2 along the rows of U matrix, typically depends on whether you put it in columns or rows, depending on the way you wrote your transformation matrix. So, here you will be putting them in the rows and now eta 1 eta 2 is nothing but basically this U matrix operating on x 1 x 2, and that gives you the transformation with a factor of half there. Okay, fine. And the transformation transformed equations of motion are basically eta 1 double dot is equal to minus omega 1 square eta 1, and for which solutions are already known with these frequencies omega 1 and omega 2. These new variables eta 1 and eta 2, they are basically called as normal modes. Okay. I will in a moment tell you what that means, but basically now we have got everything calculated there. Invert this to find x 1 x 2 in terms of eta 1 eta 2, because we already know solutions of eta 1 and eta 2. So, if I invert that, what I get is this: x 1 will be half of eta 2 plus eta 1 and x 2 will be half of eta 2 minus eta 1. Now, each one of them, eta 2 is basically nothing but a 2 times cos of omega 2 t plus phi 2 and plus a 1 times cos omega 1 t plus phi 1, that is eta 1, and similarly you get the expression for x 2. So, you see we have completely solved the problem now. We have got x 1 as a x 1 and x 2 as a function of t, and there are 4 constants here, a 1, a 2 and phi 1 and phi 2, and how do I determine these 4 constants? That of course is determined by how the initial conditions are set. So, initial conditions would be at t is equal to 0, I must tell you what was the value of x 1, x 2 and their corresponding speeds. If I tell you that, I will be able to uniquely determine a 1, a 2 and phi 1 and phi 2, and that basically completes the solution. So, what I am going to do here is look at few special cases. The first one is suppose that t is equal to 0, I set the conditions in following way. So, you take x 1 is equal to plus a and x 2 is equal to minus a. So, basically you take these two bobs and displace them in the opposite direction from the equilibrium and displace them by exactly the same amount, and now you have to just let them go, because we are going to set the velocities to 0. Okay. So, it is the same as your standard pendulum problem, you just take the pendulum away and let go. So, these two bobs will be taken away from each other and you just simply let go. So, I have 4 conditions, I will write these 4 conditions here. So, the first 2 conditions is basically x 1 is equal to a. So, it comes from this equation here, and x 2 is equal to minus a comes from this equation, and these 2 equations look like this. For the velocities, I must take a derivative of this with respect to time t, but what will that do? That will only multiply a 2 by omega 2 here in the amplitude and a 1 omega 1 sine of omega 1 t plus phi, okay, with my appropriate minus signs, and that would come to something like this: a 2 omega 2 sine of phi 2. Remember, we are going to put t is equal to 0. So, that first part will become 0, and then these 2 equations there. So, I have got 4 equations and I want to solve it for 4 constants. You can quickly see that from these 2 equations I immediately get a 2 cos of phi 2, that must be equal to 0, and a 1 cos of phi 1, that must be equal to 2 times a. Basically, you add these 2 equations and subtract to get these 2 equations. And similarly, on this side what I get is both a 2 sin phi 2 and A1 sin phi 1, both of them must be 0. Now, you look at these equations for A2. This says A2 cos phi 2 is 0 and this says A2 sin phi 2 is 0. Now, when you look at just one equation, you would say that A2 can be 0 or phi 2 can be pi by 2. In both cases, this equation will be satisfied, but if phi 2 is pi by 2, this equation will not be satisfied if you assume A2 is not equal to 0. So, the necessarily result of these two equations is A2 must be 0 and A1, of course, if you look at this one, if A1 is not 0, then quite clearly phi 1 must be equal to 0 and that gives me A1 is equal to 2A there. Okay. And phi 1 and phi 2 of course will not matter anymore, but phi 1 must be 0. Okay. Right. Look at what happens to this solution. So, we have completely determined the entire problem there in terms of the initial conditions too. Now, look at what we are doing here. So, basically all of that, if I want to see, let me take a very special case where I do a numerical computation. I will set k12 is equal to 3 by 2 m and k is equal to m. So, your omega 1 comes to 2 and omega 2 comes to 1. Okay. Here the middle spring is stronger than the two side springs. So, the coupling is strong coupling. Okay. And if I do the same thing that I did in the initial conditions, you take these two bobs away from each other and let go. If I do that, then what happens is this. So, the motion here is, because x1 is a cos omega 1 t and x2 is a minus a cos omega 1 t, both of them are going with exactly the same frequency, but they are out of sync. Okay. So, they moving either away from each other or towards each other and maintaining its unique frequency. Okay. This motion is called as a normal mode of vibration, where both these bobs, they are basically moving with exactly the same frequency. Okay. And that is why it is called as a normal mode of vibration. And you can see that this in fact is exactly same as the solution eta 1. In eta 1, the two bobs, they go back and forth from each other. That is why the eta 1 is also called as a normal coordinate, and the frequency of these normal coordinates, they are basically omega 1. In this case, that will be omega 1 there. The second normal mode is basically the one in which you take both these bobs and move them towards right or towards left, but by same amount. So, x1 is plus a and x2 is plus a, and in this case what happens is, I will ask you people to calculate these constants and show that a1 must be 0 and a2 is basically non-zero number. So, now in this case the motion is something like this. The two bobs, they basically move in sync, they are moving together. Okay. And what happens to the middle spring? This is a peculiar case where the middle spring remains in the normal length all the time, because these two bobs are moving in sync, in phase with each other all the time, and again they have exactly the same frequency of vibration, and that is why the entire system, I mean two bobs together, are vibrating with one single frequency, and again it is called as the second normal mode. So, there are two normal modes of vibration, each one has its own unique frequency, that is omega 1 for first mode, omega 2 for the second mode. In the first mode, the two particles sort of have move away from each other or move towards each other. In the second one, they move together towards one side and then to the other side. Okay. And not surprisingly, for this one the middle spring is actually not participating. You can see that the length of the middle spring remains same as natural length of the middle spring, and that is why not surprisingly the second frequency actually just turns out to be square root k by m, which is what the normal frequency or natural frequency of the two side springs would have been if they were completely independent of each other. Okay. One more case, and this case is called as weak coupling. So, in this case what I will do is I will choose K12, that is the spring constant of the middle spring, which is very small. Okay. So, let me in particular choose K12, k is equal to m, but K12 is about 10% of k. Okay. I have chosen it as 0.105, and in this case look at what will happen to omega 1 and omega 2. Omega 1 and omega 2, they only differ by this factor here, twice K12 by m. If K12 is small, omega 1 and omega 2, they are almost equal. Okay. And in our calculation omega 1 will turn out to be 1.1, omega 2 is 1. Okay. So, these two frequencies are close to each other. And now what I am going to do is set the initial conditions in following way. I will hold the bob number 1, bob number 2 in its place and move the bob number 1 by some distance. Okay. So, now this initial condition is not same as any of the normal modes there, and in that case what happens is your A1 and A2 come out to be 0.5 and 0.5 here. A1 is 0.5, A2 is 0.5. Okay. Remember the initial conditions are one bob is held in its equilibrium position, the second bob has been shifted. Okay. And if you do the, because A1 and A2 both are non-zero, x1 is basically linear sum of these two cost terms with frequency omega 1 and omega 2 which are nearly equal. And what does that remind you of? The phenomenon of beats. Okay. So, something similar you should be expecting here, and that is exactly what happens. If you look at this motion, what you see is basically the motion of the one bob was having all the energy, whereas the other one does not have any energy. So, for some time this bob will come to near halt when this bob is moving violently, and after some time again this comes to standstill and this starts moving fast. Again you can see that in this amplitude graph, when the amplitude of one bob becomes very small, the amplitude of the other bob is very large. Okay. This is of course the this is when the energy basically is getting transported from one bob to the other bob. Okay. And that happens periodically too. It goes to the second bob, then it goes back to the first bob, and so on, and all this transfer of energy is because you have a weak coupling in between. Okay. Now, let me come back to that grandfather clock problem that I was talking to you about earlier. So, when you have this two wall clocks, two long pendulum clocks attached to a wall, and you set them in motion. Once you set them in motion, they are basically linear sum of these two normal modes. So, it is a linear sum of the motion which is like this and motion which is like this. Now, it turns out that there is always friction present. Now, when the friction is present, the energy is dissipated from the system. Now, question is, these two normal modes, they each one of them have certain energy, and this energy is being dissipated. Question is, which normal mode loses it quickly? So, it turns out that the normal mode in which the both bobs are moving in sync, in phase, that mode actually loses energy very quickly, leaving you with only the other mode which is where the bobs are in sync and they are moving against each other or out of phase. Okay. So, this is about how one goes about solving a problem of this kind. Basically, n coupled differential equations can be decoupled by using a simple linear transformation. Okay. And in the next class, I will in fact develop the mathematical method to do the decoupling